the cloud. You are now being recorded. I will try to monitor the chat box, but it is a little difficult with the way we're going to be doing things this morning. So I just want to warn you up front, we may miss the questions till the end. And now this is where I've been having the technical difficulties. So, yep, I'm going to do it again. No, I didn't. Yep. You have no idea what kind of problems we're having yet. Share. Share screen. There we go. That works. Okay. It's out of the way. We're going to open that one more time. We'll see if the show works like it's supposed to. Beginning. It's not. There it is. Okay. Good morning. Welcome to auctions. Yay. I already know there's questions out there and some raised eyebrows. Bear with me. And you might say, oh, now I understand that makes sense. So the first question you guys ought to be asking is, why the dickens are we going to start doing auctions? So I went. National Association of Realtors has a page about what auctions are, how they work, and I took off some information from them. First off, who does an auction benefit? Now, looking up here on how it benefits the sellers, one of the terms of auctions is, can you hear us? Somebody please mute. When somebody bids on an auction, it cannot be retracted, and they know they got to have money. It's no longer contingent on anything. The market actually sets the value. So instead of you relying on an appraiser who may or may not appraise the value where it's supposed to be, the market is who decides what it's going to be, because there's nothing that's contingent, appraisal values or anything else. You guys are already writing offers with escalation clauses, appraisal gaps, above asking price. You know all that. Whoever's microphone is not muted, please mute it. Hello?
Hello.
Thank you. The sale is somewhat more planned in that we know when the auction start date is, we know when the auction end date is. So your seller's not left in this, how long is it going to take, so on and so forth. Now, there's still uncertainty because the house may not sell, but at least the dates are laid out more. There's a rule in the MLS that allows you to, and we'll go through rules in a minute. If you have an auction property, you don't have to allow showings up front. You can say the house will be open Saturday from 8 to 5, and that's going to be your chance to preview the home. You can still allow showings, but you don't have to. So there's a lot of things that it helps the seller kind of get through when he's trying to sell the property. To the buyer, well, again, the market sets the value. We will not be doing any multi-property auctions here until we get more used to what we're doing. What we're starting off with is an auction of an individual home by an individual to an individual seller. But the buyer knows the seller is equally committed. The buyers determine the price that they're willing to go to without the escalation clause. Auctions eliminate all negotiations because it's as is, where is. That's a legal term that says there's no warranty in the home. Purchase time is reduced because we already have it set. So there's no repairs to negotiate. There's no anything else. Why is it good for you guys? Well, give you a generated list of qualified buyers because they're not bidding on it. Yes, Tim? Microphone?
Yeah.
Microphone?
Greg, you said no inspection. So if a guy bids on a house, That's it. He can't inspect and say on second thought,
All
ain't
the
right.
terms of every auction that I've seen in the city of Wichita means if you want to do inspections, you do it prior to making a bid. Once you bid on it, you're stuck, period.
Uh. If I did that,
Mhm.
I mean, do I have to put anything up to bid?
Yes, we'll get to that in a minute.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
I have a question real quick. This is Dixie.
Mhm.
You say generates a list of ready qualified buyers, so we'll see who bids?
Yes,
Awesome.
and it's, and
Do we know if those buyers are represented or not?
yes.
They were wanting to know if they can contact the buyers, if they can see the pre-qualified buyers, they can contact them.
If they're not represented, yes. Okay. Because again, what is to you, benefit to you? You guys do CMAs. Some of you are really good at doing CMAs. And then you have an appraiser come in and tell you you don't know what you're talking about. Well, if it's sold at market value because the market actually sets the value rather than an appraiser or a CMA, you're getting a pretty good idea of what that property is worth. Takes a relatively short period of time. Now, in today's market, listings are selling really, really fast. On the other hand, there are times when we've had houses that sit on the market 3, 4, 5 months. This shortens that time up. And you get referrals and return business. So,
Quick question.
yes,
It says auctions bring people in to look at all of your listings, not just the auction listing. What does
I
that
can't hear
mean?
you. Sorry.
Lynn said people will look at all your listings instead of just your auction listing. Because on your auction, on our auction website, all of our auctions are listed there, not just the ones that they are looking at. So why should you do auctions? And this goes back to Lance's question. It doesn't count towards cap. In a traditional sale, if you had a $225,000 house, it's sold for $225,000. The seller has no upfront costs, but the seller has to pay a $13,500 commission. If you split that between the buyer agency and us, it's a $67.50 commission for each brokerage. And if you're on a 70-30 split, you would get $47.25, and the seller net after commission only would be $211,500. The way auctions work is the seller pays no commission. The commission comes from a 10% buyer premium on the buyer side. And you say, wow, it seems like a lot. Do they really pay it? Yes, every auction house I've seen through Wichita, there's a 10% buyer premium on the buyer side. That becomes our commission. So if you have a $225,000 home, we do ask up front the seller to pay us $1,500 for the marketing and the various things we do. We will cover the cost of your photographs for this. You don't have to pay us $1.50 a photo or whatever. The commission then becomes $22,500 instead of $13,500. Or if you give 3% to the buyer agent, that's $15,750. If you're on a 70-30 split, you get to keep $11,025 of that. You make a lot more money. Why am I keeping the other not towards your cap? Because we cost a lot more money. This entire website was not cheap by any means. Tracy beat me up for spending the money on it. And then every single auction that we've got to put into this thing, we have to pay them for the property to be there. Then we have to advertise this thing through Facebook and so on and so on. So there are some significant costs and time in putting an auction in.
Okay, so you may be getting to this. So if you are getting to it, stop me. 10% buyer's premium
Mhm,
paid by the buyer.
mhm.
If the buyers have an agent or is represented, that means the brokerage is getting only 7% of that because we're paying 3.
We are getting only 7%.
Correct. We're only getting 7. So out of the 7, normally under a traditional listing, we would get the 3%. So 7 minus 3 is 4%. So are you are you saying that we would get the full 7%, or are you
Correct.
keeping the 4 above our normal 3?
No.
Like what McCurdy does.
I will do a split with you on the 7%. I'm not keeping it like McCurdy and other auction
That
houses.
makes complete sense as to why it's not going towards the cap.
Correct.
Hey, can you run that over there to the tank line? Somebody put that there and it belongs over there.
Please mute your microphone. Who is
Over on the tank
talking
line
back
over there where
here?
Russell's area is.
Who has
on
the
other side of
iPhone?
inspection. You know where all the tanks are? Yeah,
Hello,
I guess that's I don't know what
iPhone.
the location is. It don't even have a location on there. But that's where it goes.
Probably why they got confused.
And they just dropped it there, but when you get a chance, I mean, I know you're
So I
busy.
have something to do.
That's Jason.
That was nice. Now I got to get this window to shrink down again. So how the commission works. There's a 10% buyer premium. That's the commission. As far as I'm concerned, that's commission like we always do commissions. I'm not going to do it to other companies. They literally say you as the agent only get 3% of it. And that's what you work with, and they keep the other 4. I'm not doing that here. I think we can do this just fine. Yes, Chris.
It's on. Just to clarify though, piggybacking on what Lance said, the $1,500 marketing fee, that's just a straight marketing fee. There's no split on that.
Correct.
Agents don't realize any of that.
Correct.
Okay, cool.
Also, later on, you're going to hear me reference the earnest money. Generally, the earnest money is a lot more on these kind of bids than on regular ones. They can be anywhere from 5,000, 7,500, whatever you and this seller come up with. If this buyer just flat drops out, all earnest money is non-refundable and is split between the brokerage and the seller, period. And again, everything I'm telling you is norms in this auction industry, with the exception of I'm giving you a lot higher commission split.
So when the earnest money is non-refundable, they back out and it goes to the brokerage.
And
Does the
I give
brokerage keep it?
I keep it and I give the seller half of it.
Okay.
Now that's on the buyer side. But it's a benefit to your seller in that their upfront cost is there, but it's minimal compared to other companies. I've seen an upfront cost of anywhere from $900 to $2,500. So I think we're fair.
Depending on how much advertising goes. That price is good.
Correct. But again, it cost me about $600 to drop one listing in the website. Then we had the time to create the packets and the other thing. But let's keep going. The 10% buyer premium is considered the commission. The buyer agent commission is paid from that, just like we are. I would normally recommend to you to offer 3%. That seems to be the norm in the city. If you decide you want to offer 4%, go for it. I don't care. If you start offering 7%, we need to have a discussion because that's affecting my bottom line too, and yours. But in general, I'm okay either way. The line item will be on the settlement statement on the buyer side as a buyer premium. So if you have a $225,000 home, you have a 10% buyer premium, that's $22,500 is the commission check that gets cut to one company or two. If you pay the buyer agent 3%, that means we retain as a company $15,750, and that $15,750 then is what we split on whatever your normal split is, with the exception of, just like the Cardis people, What I keep, my part does not count towards your cap because this isn't a standard deal like Cardis isn't a standard deal. I have significant costs and time to do it. So Cheryl brought up something, and Cheryl, I appreciate you having done this. Realtor Code of Ethics, Article 11, has to do with staying in your lane. And that if you don't understand auctions, you need to engage somebody who does, or you need to stay out of it. Let me expand on this a little bit. An online auction of a single property is not significantly different than selling a single property on the MLS. It is a different way for people to submit their offers. I've done the research, I've done the legalities, so I feel confident in our system. I do not feel confident selling 27 units in a multi-property online auction. So we won't do that. If you don't feel confident in selling 110 acres because that's out of your wheelhouse, then you shouldn't be offering it on auction. Do you understand what I'm saying there? If you feel confident in selling dirt regularly, it's not a whole lot different for us to get a different way for people to input their offer. Any questions on that?
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is stay in your lane, which I completely agree with. If you have a better right, if you have an idea, grasp of how the auction system works, great. What you're referring to as far as staying in your lane is if you're doing nothing but residential and you have an opportunity to list 180 acres and the auction may be the best way to go on it. Instead of us trying to do it here, do we either find a realtor here and within our own company to do it, or do we send it to like McCurdy?
No, we can do it here. If we have someone you'd like to talk to about, I've never done farmland of 150 acres. Can you help me figure it out?
So staying in your lane is regarding the property type, not necessarily doing the auction.
Yes. Boy, I wish I knew if Cheryl had asked a question or not. I don't know how to see the chat here. Where is it? Right there. Somebody chatted. Sounds right to me. Thank you. I appreciate that, Cheryl. I will say that the website that we purchased, and I'll show it to you in a minute, is auction specific, only for auctions, does a lot of manipulation in the background that took me several weeks to figure out how to do it and the way that they collect the monies and other things that they do. So it's not like we just threw up a page and said, here, bid. So in telling you guys about auctions now, this becomes a sticky wicket for me. And I've had some discussions with some of you here about various things. The two basic kind of auctions that we would offer is an absolute or a reserve. And let me make it clear, we are not auctioning personal property. I don't have expertise in auctioning personal property. This is a real property, a home, and so on. Absolute means that there is no bottom line. If somebody bids $5 and that's the high bidder, that's what your client has to take. Reserve means the seller has set a minimum that they are willing to take. And when that minimum is hit, it kind of flashes on the screen. Reserve is hit and people can keep bidding. The legal stuff is there so you'll understand it, but I want to tell you the line of thinking. At least old time people believe that absolute auctions will generate a lot more activity than a reserve auction. Because there's a chance I could walk in there and get that property at half the price that it's really worth. And I want that kind of deal. Reserve auctions, there are fewer people, they believe, that register for it and will try to auction on the property. I'm kind of 50-50 on that. I think your seller needs to be realistic that it could sell less than they want. They need to set a reserve price that they're comfortable with or can live with is a better way. But knowing today's market and how things are going, it seems to me that the likelihood of people bidding above what the CMA could provide is pretty likely, as long as we get them in front of the folks that are wanting to auction. And how are we doing it now with homes? We put them in the MLS and that's it. And we get 20 offers in the first day or 9 showings in the first day or. So this is a way that I think in today's climate, a reserve can work okay. But if you talk to an auctioneer, they will tell you they want absolute. They always want absolute because that, they say, generates more activity. However, one of the people in our company referred a client to McCurdy. I'm only saying their name because that's who it went to. They figured the house was worth well over $1 million and it sold for half. The client is very ticked off and is hiring lawyers because they were told, don't set a minimum price. Absolute's the way to generate people. Well, maybe it is, but you got to evaluate each of your properties and make that decision on your own. So we have, I hope I can make the screen work the way I want it to. 3 specific forms that I boiled this down to, and we're going to go over them. I hope. Okay. This is an auction contract. We're going to go through it a little bit, and I've highlighted some things that are different, but I want to point out a couple of things. First, I got permission from and modified your existing sales contract to add the sections that needed to be added and not mess with the sections that didn't need to be added with. The reason that I did that, I think familiarity is much easier for us to keep straight than it is to have some sort of form that we don't understand at all. So this form is a fillable form. It is available now on the betterks.org page dashboard, the bottom center. Click the link and you can download these. Buyer, seller, legal description, and then it says purchase price, high bid, what the buyer's premium is, the total purchase price. So if I bid $225 and I've got a 10% on top of that, that's $22.5. That's $251. Does that sound right? $251,000. And you guys will be responsible for filling this out post-auction, okay? The earnest money is written in here, others, title evidence, where we want it to go to. Beg pardon?
Do we have a preference on title companies for auctions?
I always prefer security first, but the answer is no. What I am going to require, and one of the rules that you'll see later on is, before we start advertising and do an auction, I require pre-title to be pulled.
So, Greg, just to be clear, if a buyer is represented by a realtor,
Mhm.
we, selling agent, is still going to fill out contract.
Yes, and then you'll deliver the contract to the buyer agent. Because we know how to fill this out. They don't. You guys don't need this going back 5 times because they don't know what they're doing. Okay. If there is no representation, you still need to fill it out. I want earnest money delivered by the 4 o'clock the next business day. That means you have to hurry up and write the contract and you have to get it to them. If they don't deliver the earnest money, they're gonna breach a contract and we got to go sue them. But in the meantime, why aren't we going after the second bidder and saying, let's deliver you a contract? You guys want to bid, still want this because first guy dropped out. So that's why we want it the next day.
Because wires are taking so long, I guess we can put in the miscellaneous paragraph 32, that wires can go a day or two past that.
Unless otherwise specified in paragraph 32, of course. Now, wires are one way. We can do the ACH on deposits that Security First is doing now. They can bring in certified funds. And in general, we want certified funds.
Okay, hold on. What's an ACH?
That's where you take a picture of the check and Security First says, oh yeah, it's deposited. Now we've got it.
I don't give you a check, it's a direct deposit to the account.
That differs from an EFT then.
That's just different terminology.
All these acronyms. Right?
Financing, the purchase of the property is not contingent on the buyer obtaining financing. They're on the hook whether they get financed or not. Buyer would be smart to have the funds lined up, to have a bank lined up, whatever they need to do, but that's why that section has been modified. Appraisal, we don't care about appraisal. That's your problem. When you make a bid, you are committing to buy, whether you've got an appraisal or not.
So it has to be a cash sale.
Doesn't have to be. If they've got a bank that's giving them a personal line of credit, or they got a bank lined up that said, we'll go ahead and do it, we think the house will approve. If the house doesn't appraise, then what they've got to do is come up with the extra cash like an appraisal gap. That again is all their problem. We don't worry about it. Yes, but we hope that most of the bidders are educated. If they're buyer agents, certainly should be educated. And on each auction, all the terms that I'm spelling out are listed.
Like, this is where I feel like the stay in your own lane, like, if you have a buyer.
Can't hear. Microphone.
Sorry, I'm normally so loud that I don't need a mic. Is it on?
Yes.
Okay. So this, I think, is more where the stay in your own lane really becomes a problem. If you have a buyer who's looking at buying an auction property, they need to be educated. So they need to understand that the financing is not a thing. Like, it's considered a cash sale. They will lose their earnest money. And I've seen it happen. So that's where the stay in your own lane happens more than on the listing side.
Correct. And that's why earnest money is often a lot higher, say $7,500 or $5,000 or $10,000.
And on the other side of the coin, your sellers need to understand that you're only attracting cash buyers, which will not deplete, but it will reduce the buyer pool. It's going to, because even McCurdy's will do finance. They still do financing on their purchases.
Not always.
Not always, but on, so like if I'm right, if you've got a property that is in good condition and the seller is just needing to get it sold, why would you want to keep yourself from attracting those type of buyers if they're pre-approved, versus a property that's debilitated? It needs a lot of work. Okay, those are going to attract your cash buyers.
You should very carefully read what you're talking about, McCurdy's. Yes, they will offer things conventional or FHA, but they will also say quite plainly in their terms of service, if it doesn't appraise, that's your problem. You don't have to do cash only, but the buyer needs to be educated enough to know that I'm going to get a bank loan. If it doesn't appraise, I got to come up with the extra cash. If it takes more than 30 days, I could have a problem and I've got to try to work with it to do. So it's not cash only. I've checked some of their high-end stuff and far from cash only, but their terms are the same.
It's not always cash. The way we've got this written, though, it is.
No, it isn't.
No, it's not,
No, it's
because
not.
don't forget the other part. If you're on the other end of this and working with the buyer, what you have to tell the buyer is you can do a financing, no problem. If it doesn't appraise, if you can't get your loan, and there is no clause anymore of, oh, if I can't get my loan, I get out of the deal and get my money back. That doesn't happen. You lose everything. all you're doing is taking on the responsibility of no outlets, no contingencies. You're on the hook, but McCurdy does financing all the time. Or allows
I
it.
guess my issue is accordingly, this is a cash sale. So I don't know how lenders are going to look at that.
I will investigate that terminology, but it says it is not is contingent. And that means when it closes, you'll have the cash, whether it's financing or otherwise.
I think under your financing paragraph, then you should change that accordingly. This is a cash sale, so this is considered a cash sale or something like that. I mean,
I will look at it. I'll tell you that this exact terminology came from McCurdy's contract, but I will look at it, okay? Appraisal requirements. We acknowledge that the property is being purchased as is and in its current condition. There are no lender requirements. If your lender requires you to do something, that's between you and your lender. I'll look at this statement again, and is considered does not mean is, but I'll look at it. Closing in possession is the same. Sellers represented and so on, just like you've always had. Wood infestation. You don't have to do termite. It's as is. The buyer needs termites done, then they can pay for it. Again, that's part of the condition of auctions in this city. And yes, I looked at auctions from $30,000 up to $1 million and every place in between. I wanted to compare all of them to find out what their contracts and conditions in terms of sales are. You-
Greg, one question along those lines. What percent of the sales are auctions?
There were about 500 homes sold, residential homes sold via auction last year.
And what was the total houses sold
Total,
in the MLS? 500 by
about
auction,
9,000,
15,000, I'm sorry,
about 9,000,
9,000.
maybe 10.
So
It's a low percentage.
it's a low percentage.
But part of the low percentage, now we're getting off track a little bit. My humble opinion is, till I started researching this, I thought auctioneers were special. That they had some sort of all this stuff they have to do. In this state, an auctioneer is an unlicensed activity. Because it's unlicensed, the only thing you need is a real estate license to sell real property, period. There are some unique things to auctions. I'm not trying to say there aren't, but the advent of the online auction process has changed what auctions have become. And so with you making offers and finding out you're competing with 5 other people, it seems to me that there is a place for this now that there wouldn't have been 3 years ago. It's a growing market. Right now, PenFed offers these, Keller Williams offers these, Reese Nichols offers these, McCurdy offers these. I don't know about Remax. And you'll find that each of those places has a singular agent who offers an auction. Again, I believe because of the extended cost on the back end, that they have one agent doing it who buys the website, sets up all the things, and will only take a referral on it. So they don't want to take the time to teach you guys how to do it. That's my humble opinion. This is the inspection clause. And again, we go through that the buyer is accepting the property as is. You can do inspections, but it's for your information only. You don't get to negotiate repairs.
Greg,
Yes,
where you have everything highlighted in yellow on this copy, will it be highlighted on our copy as well when we go to fill it out?
I do not intend to do that intentionally. It makes it look weird to the public. This is for me to point out the different areas. Like with anything, if you want to be an expert in your field, I would suggest strongly you read the contract line by line and compare it for yourself.
Is this going to be available for people to see prior to bidding?
I haven't decided yet.
Greg, what about the property disclosure report? I saw it there. Are we still intending to have those?
I say yes. Now, like any property that you list, most sellers will fill them out and provide them. Some sellers do not. I say that it's more important to fill one out in total. I've looked at other auction sites. McCurdy has a brief PCR that they will fill out for some things, but on their high-end properties, they fill out the entire thing. I think it's like anything else. If you've got a $30,000 house that's been a rental and the guy's never lived in it, should you fill it out? If they don't know anything, don't know.
Greg,
Yes.
back to me asking about the highlighted areas.
Mm-hmm.
Could you email us a copy of the highlighted one so that we can focus on what we need to
Sure.
do?
Yes.
So in regards to the conversation on the seller's disclosure statement, even if it's an estate or a tenant type situation, I still encourage sellers to fill one out, even if they just scratch through every page and initial the bottom of it, because I can promise you based on experience that if it ever got in front of a judge will hold the thing up in front of the buyer and say, the seller disclosed they didn't know. It was on you to discover what is or what isn't with the property.
And that's land's best practices, because the state does not require PCRs on sold property. We can't require them.
Okay, just on the flip side, let me play devil's advocate. The seller filled out a property condition report and then they discover, and a perfect example is a house that I just put under contract that had PVC piping, plumbing on the PCR, but it was actually polybutylene. So where is the seller at if they disclose something incorrectly, even though it was innocently done? If we
That-
fill out one for an as
You know,
is
that's a
auction.
different question. That would happen on any listing, whether it's auction or not.
But the
Anytime the
auction
seller
is
just,
as is.
right.
So why would a seller risk putting out false information because it's as is anyway?
The same thing can happen whether it's as is or being sold on a regular. My point is, if the seller discovers something later, you should update the PCR to reflect that. If they don't know about it up front, they're putting it out to the best knowledge they have. There's no difference in how they do it this way or another way. And as is doesn't mean that the plumbing changes. So it's kind of a sticky point that we can discuss later, but I'm not sure it matters much. You would handle it the same whether it's a regular listing or not. Going to be a long morning, folks.
Good conversation though.
Buyer's premium. The reason I have not put in a buyer's premium is while we suggest, and what the industry standard is a 10%. And I say standard in that I have found no real property in the MLS that has less than a 10% buyer premium. If when you're talking to your seller, he says, I want to go 8, put in 8. That's why it's blank. Exactly. Why would he care? I'm just telling you that it is a conversation to have. Now, the other thing,
Just click OK, now click more.
well, I will, but I gotta get the right remote control. Now, on the front page of this contract, it says the buyer premium per paragraph 36. So 36 says 8, you got to make sure that you do your math up front as 8. And then the rest of the contract as is. That's the contract.
So
I have,
when
Hmm?
we're doing a contract with nobody on the other side, like for sale by owner, say, do we put both of us on both sides? Like,
you put your, just like you do now, on both sides, agent of the seller. Now, Thank you. Is there going to be a buyer registration? Why, yes, there is, and that'll be the form after this one. And it is statutory law to disclose known items. Again, that doesn't matter whether it's an auction or not. As soon as the seller is made aware, and you as an agent have an obligation. It's both of them, okay? Thank you, Cheryl. So the next question, and I will get to the registration form in just a second, Cheryl, I promise, is how do we turn a listing into an auction? I thought long and hard about this because there are really two ways that an auction can happen. First, you have a property and it starts as an auction and then sells or doesn't sell and becomes a listing. Or it could be a listing that doesn't sell and turns into an auction. Those are the two ways I see things happening. Rather than recreate the wheel on the listing, which governs everything legally we need to have a listing, I created an addendum that will decide how everything works in the auction. And this would be the form that you would fill out with your client, either to initiate an auction never listed before, or to auction a property that we've had listed.
Okay, I'm being snarky here, but how can you update something in the future, August 2023?
That's when the document was actually updated.
But it ain't August.
Let me tell you where I got this document. I started with KREC or KAR. That's what they had in there. Thank you. I will update that. I made it a fillable document. It talks about what we're auctioning and includes the start date and time. Since this is an online auction, you got to tell people when they can start bidding, and you got to tell people when it will end. In general, I find most auctions can be anywhere from 3 days to 2 weeks. And it seems to be all over the place, where it's going to be.
How do you accommodate when it says the last bid is going to be 2 minutes after the prior bid, or the end of the auction is 2 minutes after the prior bid?
The auction software times the last bid put in. And if there are other bidders still online, the auction software says it's been extended 1 minute to give that other person time to bid. And it keeps doing that until the last bid's put in. Again, that's in the software design. And again, that's why we're doing it online and not live. Auction requires and specifications. The seller's giving us the okie dokie to do it as an auction. And we will either be with a reserve or without a reserve. One of these boxes has to be checked. If it's with the reserve, we need to know how much the reserve is so we can input it into the online auction software. If it's without a reserve, there's several things in here that talk about it's absolute. These are the risks that you can have. You need to understand them. Again, as with all forms, read the form, understand it. You can't take a listing agreement, throw it in front of somebody and say, just initial here and we're done. You need to be able to understand it for all questions.
While I think that's great that we have to mark one of those two, I would also strongly encourage to have your seller's initial and date, that check mark. That way it can't be changed or said that it was changed or whatnot, just for protection.
Not a bad idea. Hard to do when you're making a fillable form, but yes. And one thing that I put down here is the earnest money that's non-refundable. It needs to be a decision that the seller makes, because when we get a regular offer, it's got the earnest money put in and the seller can decide if they're going to accept it or not. When we're doing an online auction, we're telling people up front, your earnest money needs to be this amount or you can't play. We got to have that amount in there. Okay. Buyer's premium. I like Elena's question. Why would the buyer care what we're collecting? That's part of the beauty of this. And not trying to get real deep. One of the lawsuits against realtors and us and God and everybody out there, Keller Williams, Coldwell Banker, is saying that sellers are setting what the buyer agent will make before it ever happens. And the buyer agent has no input or anything else about it. This, by making this something that the buyer agrees to prior to him having bidding, if he doesn't want to bid, usurps that and changes that entire program. And this kind of is better for the lawsuits. But I don't want to put in a 10% if your seller says, you know what, 8%, let's try to make it more attractive. Okay, go for it. I don't care. It's your property. We're trying to help you sell. This next section, let's see, if seller enters an agreement to seller transfer prior to the auction date with them. Okay. But strongly encourage your sellers not to accept an offer prior to auction. And that's what this section has to deal with. So we put an auction out there, we advertise it online, it's got the address and everything, the seller gets a phone call. Listen, you don't want to go through the auction. Right now, I'll give you $80,000 for your house and we're done. Well, this says we still get paid. But if somebody's willing to do that, why wouldn't your seller say, why don't you get online and bid like everybody else and let's see where the price goes? Because that phone call probably isn't there to pay the highest dollar. That phone call is probably there to try to get away from the auction and buy it quicker or cheaper or so on. But we do have to have something in here that says, should Mr. Seller decide to accept an offer, we still get paid like we had auctioned it. At the same commission rate.
Quick question for you, sir. But again, I don't mean to be devil's advocate. If we receive an offer from a buyer and their agent prior to the end of the auction, I'm assuming we are still required to present that offer by Kansas real estate laws.
That's what state law says. Yep. Technology fee. Yes, Chris.
Could you tell them that you're not accepting offers? It's all done online through the auction?
You can do that if your seller authorizes you to make that statement. If your seller does not authorize you to make that statement, you have to present it. Technology fee. Well, the technology fee is basically that upfront marketing fee. I read that someplace that I like the technology better because it goes for marketing and technology. And there is one thing here we could consider, but I'm not thrilled with. If a seller is making an absolute auction in that whatever the price is what they'll accept, many firms waive that technology fee or marketing fee. I'm less excited by that for a lot of reasons. We still have the hard costs. We still have an issue of what if it doesn't sell or it sells so low below what it should have sold for, they come after us and sue us, and that's even worth more money. So I think most of your auctions up front are probably going to be, we do have a minimum fee price that we will accept. And for that, you got to pay a fee. And that fee is going to be the $1,500 that we talked about earlier. What happens if it doesn't sell? This was an important section for me because it will happen. It's in other listing agreements I have. And I think it's a discussion we'd rather have with the seller when we're talking about auctioning it now before it happens rather than after. So this, we're giving the seller the choice. If it doesn't sell because and if you don't have a reserve, I want it to go back into a pure listing. But if the seller says, I've had it on the market for 3 months and you tried to auction it, this is our last resort. What I'm trying to do is give you a choice that we could renegotiate the listing agreement altogether, or we could let them out of it. Most companies won't let them out, but I want to be fair to the client. And a lot of the rest of this talk is, if we are going to put it on the auction, if we're going to make it back into a regular listing, what's the price going to be?
Another question I have is that transaction fee of $1,500 or whatever it is that they pay up front. Is that refunded to them if they drop us, or do we keep that?
Everything we have says we get to keep it. Most companies, if they convert it to a listing, will forgive some of it or half of it. In my opinion, half of it's fair. However, we'll be making rules as we go on some of these and trying to make it right for people.
You're talking about.
The 1,500.
Right. But you're talking about after a failed auction, right?
Correct.
So if it's a failed auction, you still put your effort forth, right?
Correct.
So why would you refund them anything?
Because some
Welcome.
because some companies do, and it's what the market will bear.
Okay, just asking.
Now that forgiveness back to them might be in the form of, we'll lower your overall commission half of that or something. We'll figure that out when it gets there, but that's what all of that section is about.
So
And yes,
if it reverts to a listing, and you said we renegotiate it, does that mean that then we go back to like a potential 6% commission? Like a
Yes.
typical, okay.
Then at that point, if it reverted, just to go a little farther, Lynn, if it reverted back to a 6% commission, would then it count towards your cap?
yes, that's a regular listing. That is no longer an option. Believe me when I tell you, I much prefer a 3-page addendum to some of the other forms I saw that tried to make the whole listing document over and over again. So then let's go to Cheryl's form, broker registration co-op form. This is for a broker or an agent to register a client who is going to register online to bid. We have some rules in here. We tell them to where to go to bid. We tell them who the prospect is. And I've given Tracy this job and she's thrilled with it. Whenever a form comes in, she's got to date it and time it. Because I know while it may be difficult to believe, some buyers will register more than one real estate agent.
What?
I know, hard to believe, Chris. So we are going to date and time them, and we inform the broker agents that we will accept the first one we receive. And that's done through the private remarks section of the MLS. We will get into that in a minute. These are the rules of the broker participation. We got to have that form no later than 5 p.m. the day prior to the auction. I don't want to get it 3 days after the auction started. Okay. The broker is going to, if their client wants to see the property or look at anything else, they're going to go show them, and they're going to help them bid online and help explain the terms. And it's got all of the rest of the things that the broker buyer agent will do, including the commission. Now, if you offer more, you will have to scratch that out and offer something, write whatever else in you're doing. Yes, Lance.
Is there a deadline for registrations?
Yeah, 5 p.m. prior to the auction, the day the auction starts. Right there in the first paragraph.
That could be problematic, Greg. If it's a 1-day auction, like on Friday, I could see that. But if
Mhm.
it's going to be, say, a 2-week auction, which is maybe more common, I can send out that MLS information to a buyer and he can look at it, think about it, think about it, think about it. And then inside of that 2-week window, he can say, well, yeah, I want to make an offer.
Well, the nice thing is we can adjust this, but we can make a manual override
Okay,
whenever we want.
okay.
And I did find this the same on 3 different companies, same forms. And yet, like you, I know some of them are going to come in and bid 3 days later, and we
Right.
make adjustments for that. What we don't want is a guy to register 10 bids and then suddenly they're an agent.
I'd rather see it like 1 or 2 days prior to the end of the auction to cover any.
Right.
buyers that
Okay.
want.
So let me play devil's advocate. 1 to 2 days prior to the end of the auction, and a guy's been bidding for 2 weeks, and 2 days before the end, suddenly he has an agent. That's a problem too, because they've already registered and done all that, and they're just cutting into our back end without showing the property or doing anything.
So I've been caught in that with McCurdy's, where I've had a client that registered and I literally had to call Braden and say, I have a buyer agency agreement my buyer didn't know. So if that were to happen, because we are keeping track of who's registered and so forth, all we have to do is just go in and look and say, sorry, they've already registered.
Or we can go in and say, you know what, I agree with that. And Lance comes to me and say, I got a call from this other agent, I want to accept it. Okay. We're not going to be, I know how McCurdy does it. I've seen how angry people can get. I don't want to get that angry. I'd rather have an exception to a rule than make a rule that's hard to, okay? Oh, we got some comments. Dixie, please email a copy. Yes, by the way, thank you for a hard print. Well, you're sweet. Thank you.
The best, Greg.
Yeah, I didn't mean it. Dixie, are you leaving then? Oh, well, okay.
No, I'm not leaving.
Yeah, I haven't even got to the website yet. Okay, so those are the forms. The next thing we're going to go to is the website. And before I show you that, I wanted to tell you a few things. The auction website is twofold. It is a standalone website that markets and takes your online bids and so on and so forth. And it also has a independent app that they can carry around on their phone and watch and get notices and make bids while they're driving down the highway. So it does both. They don't have to sit in front of a computer. In the App Store, whether it's Google or Apple, it's called BHGRE Alliance. I didn't get to choose the name. That's just what it is. Some of the rules of the bidding. I think I said 2 minutes earlier. I've changed that to 60 seconds. I can go back and forth. I require bidders to have a credit card of $500 that they submit, and they are put $500 on hold. And as soon as we verify that is good, we return that to them. We're not trying to charge them up front for every bid, but we want to make sure they're somewhat credit worthy. Some companies do $1,000, some companies do $1. I figure if we're going to ask for a $3,000 earnest money, $500 hold that is immediately returned isn't bad. However, we can also override that. So if somebody calls us and says, I don't have a credit card, I want to register to bid, here's my bank letter showing I've got $300,000 in the bank, we can go in and say, okay, you can bid. Okay. When I tell you there's a lot more to this, and in the back end, we have to do more, I'm trying to simplify it so you do your end, we do our end. So you're doing listings, we're doing all the heavy lifting, in the back end. Once a bid is submitted, it cannot be attracted. And it's stated in so many places in so many ways about the liability of a bidder. You bid, it's in. If the home isn't purchase, the earnest money or deposit or whatever you want to call it is split 50-50 with the seller. And unless you guys say differently, all terms of service say as is, where is. I've checked with Frank, that is a legal term that has to do with the real property, not the personal property. It is what we will put so that we're not dealing with a bunch of other stuff. And it's never, ever contingent on financing. So let me move this. Let me go here. The website is, and I put it on your cheat sheet, betterksauction.com. And this is the website. One of the things that I would like you all to read under the About Us is the standard terms. They are long as get out, and I wasn't going to print them out for you. But these are the terms for the bidder, not for your seller or anybody else. This is what the standard terms are that show up on each bid website and each property site, unless you guys tell me that I'm to change these. So when we look at a property, we have the home page, the auction page, the results page. This is the only auction we have in there. It was a test one we did to try to figure out what was going on. When they click on it, they're going to get all the pictures that you guys are going to provide us from the MLS. It is an online auction, gives a start and end date. And when they go to bid, they can register. They will have the details, which will be the remarks section that you guys provide us from the MLS. The contact will be just us in general. And believe me, we're going to pass them on to you guys. And then all the terms of the auction that tell the bidder, hey, we're going to charge a credit card. If you don't have financing, tough. If you back out, you're in trouble. And what happens to the earnest money if you do back out? It's all listed out in there. On the home page, if I can get back to it, you'll also see we have our app. And our upcoming auctions will start going in right here. On our app, should they register to bid, now they can come in here and download from the App Store or Google Play and start using their phone in order to bid on all this. This is the same system that Reese Nichols uses, same system Berkshire Hathaway uses.
Do you know what kind of success that they're having in these auctions?
It's hard to measure.
Well, Greg, that was my question. How many? About 1 out of 20 are sold by auction. So they've got 5% of the market, auctioneers do.
Roughly.
I mean, that's historical, whatever the actual number is, but ballparkish.
But is that 5% of the market because it's not being marketed widely through real estate agents? Is it 5% of the market because 3 years ago we didn't have 20 offers on every home? Is it because auctions are really that more tough? I'm not entirely sure.
I could tell you if you want to know.
Oh,
I mean, it's up to you.
I will also say, and I'll go get the chat, thank you. I will also say that we have an app for that. Yeah, we do, Cheryl, thank you. In the past, if you guys had told me auctions, I'd say only stigmatized properties get auctioned. If you got a good listing, you don't need to auction it. And then I was talking to an auctioneer that I was trying to get to come to the company. And And he's still planning on coming. And he said, well, you need to have auctions. And I said, yeah, I don't know. He says, no, I sell everything auction. I make so much more money. It's ridiculous. Okay. Well, if you are, why shouldn't I share that wealth with everybody rather than saying, you got to send it to Reese Nichols Commercial?
Statistically speaking, auctioneers make more money than doctors.
I know. So these are the properties that Reese Nichols has currently, including this house, but they don't really have their results page here. You see if I can get to it. Online bidding. That takes me to Bid Wrangler.
Now, are these in the MLS also?
Hmm?
The auctions that they're in the MLS?
Absolutely.
Okay, they're not pocket.
We're
Well-
going to talk about that in a minute too.
Well, and the auction is a field in the MLS. I mean,
Absolutely.
we can go back and query to say last year, how many sold by auction?
Which is why I gave you that number that
Right.
I gave you. So, and you'll see they have docs in here too. We'll talk about that in a minute. I know this meeting is running long, guys, but I think it's worthwhile. I hope you do too. So somebody said yes. So there is some, I just wanted to give you the feel of how this would look. It goes back to our website. Our website has up here auctions. By the way, when I started researching, I called the company and said, how come PenFed doesn't have auctions on their main website? The next day it popped up. It's amazing how that happened. So,
So is auctions on our individual websites or just the home one?
this is just a home one. You'd have to add that on your individual one. So did everybody get good enough feel for what's going on with the auctions? Or do you need to see more of the website? Okay.
Can we look at the website yet?
Oh yeah, it's live.
Okay,
betterksauction.com.
okay.
So Greg, I guess and I'll have my 10-year anniversary in September, and I just did my first auction ever this past year, and it turned out okay. My seller did, and it was a stigmatized property. And I referred it to McCurdy, and it was, nice not having to do anything, but I really didn't like not having control because I'm kind of a control freak.
And you
But-
got a 26% referral fee based on the 3% too, I'm sure.
No, she probably got the whole 3%.
I got 3%,
Ah,
I think.
okay.
But I guess my concern is because McCurdy's the big auction place in town, and they have such a huge
Oh, sure.
marketing pool presence that that's my concern. I
Your
mean,
concern is well-founded. Got to start someplace.
right.
When you started 10 years ago, Cindy Carnahan was the biggest agent in town. That didn't stop you from starting to become a real estate agent. Will we have some learning bumps? Absolutely. Will we be able to market it adequately? I think for most things we'll be fine because the MLS distributes auctions through so many places that has the kind of things that reach folks. We will do social media advertising on top of it, but we'll do some email advertising. I get emails from Wygan now that says, this auction ends in 3 hours. You want to do it? Does McCurdy have a long list of investors around the country? Quite probably. And there is some sense that if you have investment property particularly, it might make more sense to go with them. On the other hand, if we are fighting the problem of I'm getting 5 offers for everything, I don't know what the other offers are. My guy will do an escalation clause and of an appraisal gap, and we're offering over asking price. Doesn't it make sense that we could do that in an online auction atmosphere rather than just hope my buyer gets it or just hope my seller gets it? So this is more of a competitive tool to somebody who wants to buy a home to live in, rather than I'm selling a list of 27 investment properties.
I think with one of the ways that we have an advantage over the McCurdy's type is when they do their multiple property auctions,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to tell the sellers that they're going to have a big buying pool there at the same time. But the problem with that is that if out of that buying pool, an investor or a buyer bids on the first two houses and gets those houses, guess what? They're done. They're probably not going to be bidding on the 13th, 15th, 18th house that's in that auction. So that's one advantage that we have by saying this is a standalone auction for your property. And we're going to advertise and market it to all buyers that are out there. I think it works to our advantage. It drives me crazy when McCurdy says, oh, we're going to put it in, we're going to put your property in with a multiple property deal. Then you got to hope that you're in the front end of that.
Well, and again, with all that, it's kind of staying in our lane, but offering a different delivery system. A lot of the McCurdy online auction, the multiple properties that I've seen, very low end properties spread all over. It's like somebody's buying a piece of junk that they hope to fix up and rent. What I'm looking at may not be that, but let's look at Penn Fed for a minute. These are supposedly their results. And, you know, some of these houses aren't the biggest or best. Some of these are parcels of land. There's a church. There's some smaller houses. I'm not saying that we won't do smaller houses, but there's some nicer houses as well. So you kind of have to, and we'll get into that in just a second. It's not like you're going to throw everything you have up here to be an auction. This is going to be another tool in your toolbox.
The only thing that concerns me is the elimination of a huge buyer pool that doesn't have the $10,000, $5,000 as a down payment. They're the VA or the FHA buyers.
Sure.
Are we eliminating those?
Well, if you've got a house that you put on the market that, are they already eliminating themselves because they can't get into that kind of house? How many people here are working with VA buyers right now that you've written 5 contracts and can't get them accepted? I know there's several. I don't see the hand going up, but it happens because nobody wants to do it. I'm not saying this is going to be for everybody. And it might be, you know, I was having a conversation with one of the agents. Their seller was just sick and tired of having to show the house to so many people and people going in all the time. Okay, let's change how we're selling it. Try a different approach. Tell me what your minimum dollar is, and we'll see if we can make this work for you. And in that case, it might be something. It's going to be a discussion with every buyer and seller microphone.
Just to be clear, are you saying that when it goes to auction, we're not allowing showings anymore?
No, but you can.
Oh, okay. I was just checking because you said they were sick and tired of showing.
We're going to get to that in a minute. I keep getting stopped here, right?
So I just pulled it up in the MLS under residential only. There are currently 31 active auction listings right now in the MLS,
right,
for residential only.
31.
And there's probably 15 active listings.
Apologies.
So let's see if I can get this thing to play again. Hey, it did. All right. So there is just some about our website and the app.
Awesome.
Well, I'm not done yet, but thank you. Here's the terms and conditions. I did put them up here. I did not put them on your cheat sheet. It's just too much. I think you should read through them all on the website. But keep in mind, this isn't for the seller. This is for a bidder. This is what a buyer agent will be dealing with. And if you guys are helping any of your clients with the auction, you should be reading these from the other company's websites. Absolutely.
So do we have a terms and conditions for the seller too? Somewhere?
That's more or less the listing
The listing,
agreement
okay.
addendum. Okay. So after the auction's over and the property sells, what do I expect you guys to do? Well, We're gonna have it, we're gonna print out this little thing, says this is what it's sold for, this is the guy that bought it, and so on. And I expect you to write the auction contract, assist getting the earnest money if they don't have a buyer agent, deliver all that to the title company and continue on like you do with every contract. Keep in contact with everybody, make sure it's going to close on time, la-di-da, la-di-da. In general, almost all auctions say it's going to close within 30 days of the end of the auction. It also says in the terms and conditions that if the buyer and seller wish to negotiate, they can, but they don't have to. So if the buyer says, I can't get my money for another 2 weeks, and the seller says, that's okay, we'll wait to 2 weeks, they can agree to that, like any contractual agreement. So how do you decide what, just kind of the order of things? You just can't say, I'm going to list every property as an auction. You need to evaluate the property. You need to evaluate your seller. You need to see what their motivation is. You need, I'll get to the MLS rules in a minute, but auctions do, and properties with more than 5 people, according to the MLS, you can say no showings on that property. In the remarks section, you have to say property will be open from 8 to 5 Saturday the 5th for all viewings. Send your buyers, send your inspectors, whatever you want. That doesn't preclude people from having inspections and other things, but you can do that and are allowed to do it. You need to have the auction agreement, and then we will create the buyer's packet with the documents for you. Once that's done, we're going to start marketing the property, and I expect you guys to coordinate showings or your open house. You can leave it on there like a regular house and say you can go see whenever you want to. You can restrict the showings. You can have an open house and do showings. On auction day, we will have the whole process of the online auction, which we have to monitor and continue and go. And you can sit with us if you want. That's our job. Post-auction, you guys have to facilitate the paperwork and turn it in. Then everybody goes to closing. Company rules, online only. We will not do any live auctions. I am not an auctioneer and I don't want to be one. I think online auctions should have their own place in the real estate world outside of a real auctioneer, if you will. We require pre-title. I want to make sure that person that you want to sell their house has it free and clear, and we're not going to run any problems trying to deliver title. Not going to do that. We need all of your listing information and photos at least 1 week prior to the start of the auction. That gives us time to create an auction packet, to get everything online, to start advertising it, and so on. I wouldn't go out 6 months to do one if I were you, but I think 2 weeks might be more appropriate. But we will try to work with you if you're turning it in 1 week in advance. There is company approved verbiage that goes in both the private remarks and the public remarks. And it is different because of MLS rules. You've got to have the start and the stop date and time. I put the 10% buyer premium because I suggest that the 10% is where to start. But again, you're independent contractors. We'll work with you.
I'm assuming that you'll have the private and public remarks saved somewhere where we can copy and paste.
Yes. Upfront marketing fee of $1,500. MLS rules. Specific to auctions. You can put them in active in the MLS.
Greg,
Yes.
your $1,500 marketing fee, the seller pays that. Who do they pay it to?
Alliance Marketing Group.
And we bring it straight to you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
You put it active in the MLS, and the auction date and time can be placed in the public remarks. If it fails to sell, you have 5 days to either change the auction date, move it forward, change listing from auction to for sale, and then you have to have a non-zero asking price. If it's active, you got to have a regular price, or you can withdraw it and cancel it. And this is what I was indicating about showings. You have the option, because it's an auction, of not allowing showings except for a specific day or a specific weekend or 2 specific days. Or you can have the option of leaving it in showings just like it is now. It's your call. I think part of the attraction for most sellers will be, I'm not going to get 27 showings in the first 2 days, and I'm going to keep answering the phone and doing all of this. But you're allowed to do it either way. I would recommend strongly that in the MLS, you upload the normal documents, PCR, lead-based paint, whatever you do as part of your regular listing practice. You also need to upload the BHG co-op registration form for a couple of reasons. One is it's easier than having people call us all day long and ask for one. 2, in the remarks that we made for you, it says that they will be in there. In the
Right.
private,
I'm sorry, just real quick. Are you guys going to be monitoring when an auction listing goes into the MLS? Will you guys be like
nope,
checking
you
it
have
to
to
make
tell
sure?
us.
Well, I know, but once it goes in, you will look at the MLS listing and make sure it's all this
Yes.
best practices and all that.
In the private and public remarks, you need to put that it's a 10% buyer premium, that you have as is condition. It is an online auction, and the date and time the auction starts and ends. And again, that's provided in the remarks I gave you. In the public site, you can never reference our website name or bidding app, which seems really counterintuitive to me. However, what McCurdy does, and what I'm going to copy, and what you've got on the little piece of paper you have there, is offered online auction only through seller agent's website. That's what McCurdy does. They're kind of the gold standard in my views. If they can do it, we can do it. Obviously, there's some things in the public and private remarks you guys will want to change. You don't want to have an auction that ended a month ago or started a month ago. If you do a 10% buyers, if you do an 8% buyer's premium, you'll want to change that to 8%. Deposit may be in the form of cashier's check, ACH, or certified funds, and see all terms at seller's agent website. And then down at the bottom, is it reserve or absolute?
Greg,
Yes.
so we had said something about like, we're gonna put it in for auction, and then someone comes in and says, hey, I'm gonna bring you a contract today. I don't want to bid on it, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, well, here it says bidding will remain open until blah, blah, blah. Well, what if we accept an offer 5 days before the bidding supposedly stops?
Then we would have to notify everybody who bid on the property that we've accepted an offer and turn the house to pending with all the pending information in the MLS.
Okay.
Would that,
Chris loves microphones.
would that cause issues of unfair?
Sure it would.
Yeah.
And I
do
wouldn't
you-
recommend
Do
it.
you think we should make a rule that if you're going to do an auction, we should not allow bids be submitted beforehand?
Wouldn't it be smart if we could tell the public that they have to go by our rules? As an agent, all we can do is recommend strongly and why they should do things. It's much like all of you have had a case in here. Remember that we've got a verbal agreement on a contract, and the next thing you know, the seller's changed his mind or got another offer, or, and you have to go to your seller and say, I wouldn't do that if I were you, because you agreed to it verbally. And if the seller says, tough, I'm going to take it, you can't say no. All you can say is, I would advise strongly against it. But it is your decision.
That seems really bad.
That's why 5% or less.
Well, you say that, but we have decisions we make every day where somebody changes their mind or they don't want to do something or they agree to something and then change their mind before they sign it. We have to deal with that every day as an agent.
No, I guess I'm saying we should put it out up front and just tell them up front, if you want to go this route, part of going this route is
Yeah,
We're
you're
not
paying
going-
for the auction. We're gonna auction
Absolutely.
it. It's-
right.
you-
We're
you
not
know,
gonna, I'm
you can't
not
sell
gonna
it
present
before.
things because as your representative, I'm not gonna get you in a trick bag of accepting something early and 5 people sue you for discrimination or
I
something.
absolutely say that. And state law requires that we present an offer if it's brought in.
That's what I was gonna say. I think it goes back to educating both sides because
Exactly.
we would be required to present that offer to our seller, but again, encourage them.
And
We probably don't want to accept this. We can hang on to it and educate the buyer's agent.
and
We
there's all
appreciate you
kinds,
submitting it, but more than likely, nothing will be accepted
and there's
until
all
the
kinds
auction.
of things you can say to your seller, tell them about, as Chris says, have that discussion up front so they're prepared. Second, if somebody presented an offer up front like that, I would say, they're just trying to get away with cheaper. They're not trying to speed the thing up. Are you sure you
But-
can do that, or do you want to wait until you get people going at each other? Yes, Pam?
We could have them sign when we discuss that at the listing. We could say, so we're not going to bring any offers prior to that, and have it in writing and the seller sign it so that we can upfront automatically tell anyone that brings one, seller's not accepting offers till the end of it.
And you can absolutely do that. And I discussed that a little bit earlier, that you can do similar things, that if they tell you not to present any offers, you don't. But if they say, no, I want to see any offers that come in, then you can choose, I don't want to do business with you then. Or you can say, I think it's so low of a chance, but I'm not going to set that rule for you guys. You're independent contractors. You've got rules. If you've got a contract on a house right now, and tomorrow you get another offer for $10,000 over, what do? Do you just ignore it? Do you present it to the seller? Do you make it the seller's choice? Just because it's a really bad idea doesn't mean that lessens your responsibility. We got another offer. If you take it, you could be in all kinds of legal trouble. I wouldn't do that if I were you, but I got it. I got to show it to you.
So are you going to put this verbiage in the company clauses and authenticsign so we can just click on them?
I can do that maybe. Okay. However, just so you guys will know, I looked at uploading my 3 forms that I created to putting them into Authenticign. They want $500 to upload them into Authenticign. No, not the clause, the 3 forms I created. They don't have to be mapped or anything else. They just have to be uploaded PDF. It's $500. I said, I'll pass.
Most likely you'll find them dogs link section of dashboard better data.
Did you have a question,
Okay,
Pam?
here.
Pam, did you have a question?
I don't know.
Okay.
That was a long
I
time
was-
ago.
In and out, and so I didn't catch everything, so I will apologize. Right, but 1,500, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so you'd have to carefully assess if that home is better marketed auction versus traditional. Because if I go auction route with it and it doesn't sell, I'm assuming when we flip it to traditional, the days on market have already accumulated. Is it a 2-week
Probably.
period?
Probably, yes.
So it has to go off market for 30 days for that to reset to 30, but we all know, we all go look and see history on a property. So we know it was on the auction block. It didn't go. So that's kind of an area that I'm not sure about with regard to deciding if auction would be the best way for a property to be sold.
I understand. Auction's not going to be for everybody or every property. Everything needs to be evaluated based on gut feel, client's motivation, price range. I mean, if you've got $190,000 house and you know that people are offering over asking price and doing all the other things, maybe that would be one that would be eligible. If you've had a house on the market for 2 months, and you've got a seller who's getting desperate and he's willing to take less, maybe auction would be good because we'd build that excitement. We hope. It may not. You could sell for less. If you've got a seller who says, I'm sick, I don't want to be out of the house more than 1 day, well, we have an option that might work. Let's discuss all the downsides for that while you're discussing the upside. Everything's going to be an evaluation based on the person and the property.
And Greg, too, that's if you, not today, not here now, but if you could put out like a checklist of say, well, these are the types of houses that would probably go to an auction. Higher price, lower price, middle price, whatever. I don't know. Or absent buyer, present buyer, limited exposure buyer, things like that, that we don't know. We've never auctioned a house.
Right.
I've done thousands of CMAs.
But you've done listings for a long time. I looked at the houses that sold yesterday as an auction, and the average price last year was somewhere around $90,000. And the price range was 2,000 to 1.5 million.
That's all kind good, but that'll help us.
Right. But my point to that is there were a lot of homes in the $200,000 range. There were a lot of homes in the $2,000 range. Now, I didn't looked at multi-property and some other stuff. So I don't know what is going to make sense for everything all the time. I can tell you what the association or realtor association said, which I showed you up front, was advantages to both sides. There's a little course at realtor.com that tells you about auctions, about what they are, and has a slideshow. Yes, Pam.
I would just want to be incredibly careful as a listing agent on how this would be something to encourage all of us to not McCurdy. How do I want to say this? Not to tell people to go to auction without a reserve. That's a very fine line. And I have someone that I know that sold over $500,000 property and was told by the listing agent and McCurdy, we can sell that for you. You don't need a reserve. And he sold it for far less. And he's already pursuing, sorry, hope I'm not divulging too much information. Probably not, because
You're out of the room. I shared that, but not who came and told me about it.
Oh, I know that. So I would just say, be very careful about that part. Yeah.
And in my humble opinion, most people in the old days, I would have thought, okay, we'll do absolute and we're going to attract more people, but are those more people really honestly trying to buy that house, or are they just looking for the best bargain they can get? Now, I would probably say I would have a hard time selling my own personal house without some sort of reserve. Just couldn't do it. Now, that reserve might be lower because I'm making a little more money, or it's faster, or there's some more certainty. But let's say my house is worth 190. I might set the reserve at 160. I'm throwing that out there. I don't owe a loan on it. I'll be disappointed if I get 160. But then I might get people who are honestly willing to pay 160 instead of worrying about the people who are only wanting to buy it for 80, So I think a reserve is going to be an extremely smart thing for most people, especially if there's a mortgage on it. If there's a mortgage, you cannot be affording to take an $80,000 and owe 200 on a mortgage. Can't happen.
I think with the number of auctions that I have done through McCurdy or whatever, what I have found is that if you are listing a property that you walk in and right away it's not in good shape, it needs a lot of work, it's probably going to be an investor that's going to buy it, chances are you probably ought to do an auction. Out of all the ones I've done, only one didn't turn out very well. In those debilitated properties, I usually will let the seller decide whether or not they want to do reserve. And I give them the pros and cons of both. And I don't push them into one way or the other. I let them make that decision. Now, if you have a property that is in good shape, doesn't need a lot of repairs or anything, then I would definitely, if you're going to go the auction route, I would definitely put a reserve on it, because the debilitated properties are the ones that the investors are going to come to. And the savvy ones know that they would prefer to buy via auction because they know what they're bidding against and whether it fits in their budget and whether they can make money off of it or not.
I haven't been to a lot of auctions, but the couple that I've been to, one of them actually sold at the auction for what it had been listed for in the MLS. The other one actually sold for over what it had been listed for in the MLS, and that didn't include the buyer's premium. Then I went to a very high-end one, which is probably similar to Pam's. I went to a very high-end one that should have brought around $1 million, and the highest bid was 450. Fortunately, they did have a reserve. But I think it depends. But I don't know that it's a bad option. I think overall it's a good option, except for maybe high-end.
I think that part of it is really going to depend on that buyer pool. And we know that the buyer pool right now is in that sweet spot of like $150,000 to $200,000. I got to tell you, I would definitely be telling all of my sellers in that price range, hey, auction's a thing to consider, because when you're getting 9, 13, 15 offers on a home that is $175,000, yeah, let them outbid each other and see what we're going to get for this and not have to worry about an appraisal gap.
And I'm going to add to that because you make a great point. Ethically, when you have multiple offers, you're really only supposed to pick one offer to negotiate with. It's kind of frowned upon if you're reaching out to two different realtors who got close. Yeah, hey, I'm going to reach out to realtor A and say, if you can bump it up to 200,000, okay, they say, okay, we'll do it. Then you go to realtor B and say, if you can go up to 205, you're really not supposed to do that. It's unethical, whereas the auction process makes it legal.
Yes, Chris?
One comment, one question. So comment is, one thing the sellers also have to realize is if they're paying $1,500 up front, great. But if you have a $300,000 house, generally, we're in the same company, so we can talk about this. Generally, that's $18,000 in commission. They're saving $16,500. So even if they set their reserve $20,000 under what you tell them the house is worth, even if they got that, they're still breaking even on what they were going to pay. So it's an amazing objection handling technique to say, yeah, you're going to give me $1,500 up front, but you're going to save $20,000. So set your reserve a little bit low and let's go for this. Quit your whining. Kidding. Kidding. And then the question that I had is, as part of the marketing fees and things like that, that you're charging and doing, are you, as a company, doing special signage? Are you ordering special signs, riders, anything like that, that say auction or?
Well, I just
auction
got
only
asked
or
that
web-
question and I hadn't put any thought into it because I've been in legalese and stuff here.
Thought of it myself, so you know.
So yes, we ought to have a bigger sign and it ought to say auction. And I'm not trying to cherry pick too much here, but this is a house that went on auction last September. It sold for $265,650. RVM says it's worth $276. The pictures are okay, but it's not really updated inside. So I think in answer to your questions of what kind of house, what can be done, there is a lot of variables that could be brought into what is the motivation, what do people want to do, can it be different kinds of houses? Now, when I look at this house, concrete looks terrible. It's got a nice backyard. It's clean, but it's not very updated. It sold for, at auction, Rick Brock, $264. And our PR says $315. Now, is that because there's a lot of updating that needed to be done? Did it look vacant and like they were trying to get rid of it? Yes. Did I see some houses that weren't vacant when I was, but I'm not gonna bore you guys by looking at all these real quick. I'm just trying to say there's a lot of variance in here that,
And Greg, this kind of ties in with what Chris just said about the $1,500 marketing fee. You also have to let your sellers know that if you have a house that's priced, valued, let's say your CMA says 200,000. If a buyer were to pay 200,000 for it, that means the buyer's going to come in, has to pay 220,000 because of the 10% buyer's premium. So the chances, there's a very good solid chance that instead of offering 200,000, you're going to lose some of the buyers because they don't want to pay that 10% buyer's premium. So they're going to come in at 180 or 185 or whatever the case may be, because they know they have to pay that additional 10%. You got to have that conversation with your sellers because they need to understand and know that some buyers are, even though we think your value of your home is this, it may not get there because the buyer's premium. It probably will happen. The commission.
here's another one. It was 195. The AVM is 203. The inside was nice enough, but it was very much a dated home. Clean. Nothing wrong with it. So I think what I'm saying, this could be a viable option for a lot of people. It may not be a viable option for people. You're gonna have to talk to the microphone because all the people out there are listening.
Oh, yeah, well, it's too late.
Thank you.
You want to keep your name off the lawsuit. Keep your name off the lawsuit.
I haven't covered it exactly, and I
That's
don't
all
know
I worry
exactly
about.
yet. I know Facebook paid ads will be part of it. Direct emails will be part of it to a variety of agents. I've seen a lot of that with Keller Williams auctions, is that they have a laundry list of agents they send out to and say, hey, we're auctioning this. As we start building a database of people who have tried to auction before but didn't win, we might start adding those into the database as well. It's kind of tricky though, because I don't really see us trying to get across country to investors for most of what I'm thinking of anyway. That we may build into that, but right now, this to me is more of a one-off on each house.
When does this start? When is
Uh,
this
Today.
today?
Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I want to go
Probably us.
We already did.
first.
Let me know how it goes.
Well, okay.
Good luck. Godspeed.
So, about a month and a half ago. So about a month and a half ago, when Greg was kicking this idea around, we said we had a client that might do it, so we presented it to them. They loved the idea, thought it was great. I don't know, what is it, 300,000, 204, I don't know, some shit like that. About that. And they loved it, but what they decided to do was they wanted, because it is vacant land and, it's not high demand, they decided to give it like a few more months to sit on the MLS as a regular listing. And then if they didn't get anything from then they were just going to jump onto the auction thing. We did explain it to them with the reserve and, all that jazz. But they didn't balk at all at the $1,500. They loved the idea of someone else paying the 10% buyer premium. Told them exactly what all the objection stuff that we talked about, told them exactly what it meant, the offers being presented, blah, 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 blah. So this lady loved it. Now, is she actually going to follow through with it and let us do it, when it doesn't sell? Who knows? But we've already had one conversation and they liked it. Oops.
Well, that concludes what I had for presentation.
Great class.
Good job, Greg.
Yeah, it was better than average.
It was just.
Yeah.
All right.
Give me 51, 52 there on the scale.
I'm just glad
Okay,
I
I'll
can
take
stop
that.
proofreading stuff.
We've done a lot of work on this, and we will have some hiccups that we got to overcome. We'll work through that. Anytime you start a new program. But we've done a lot of research to try to come up with what we believe is the best possible way we could start. And I think we're there. So
Greg,
thank you guys very much.
Greg,
Yes, Dixie.
I have a property I've been waiting on this for. And my question about your signs, are you gonna buy signs and how quickly could we have them?
Well, I have to design them. GR has been pretty good with me, but they'll have black frames instead, unless I do a one-off white frame, which I can probably live with.
Could we start off with just a writer in the meantime and just to get us going faster?
That's what I was gonna suggest.
Well, the writers I could have probably within a day.
Ju-
But if you want a big sign, that's gonna take a little longer.
Well, if,
Also, writers are cheaper.
right? Well, if it's a residential property, for me, I wouldn't, and this is addressing your question, Dix. So if it was me, I wouldn't want one of those big 4x8 stuck in the middle of a residential property. I think that would look silly.
Well, you may have a problem with the sign ordinance. depending on
Right,
what it says,
exactly.
too.
So
I'm just wanting to get attention.
right.
Yeah.
So I would say, a regular yard sign for residential stuff, a regular yard sign that just specializes in the auction, has a website or whatever, that would be great. Because you're interested in getting this done muy pronto, a sign writer can do the same thing. The sign's out there, you got that done, and then gives Greg a little bit of time to design the front, how we want to put it on. Yeah, and this stuff ain't cheap, so for me personally, I'd throw a sign writer on it if you're wanting to do it right away. If it's like mine, that's going to be a month or two down the road, yeah, then get me a big old sign. That's my thoughts. Big old sign.
Give me a call later, Dixie, and tell me where it's at and whether it's a house or if it's out in the country with like acreage, and we'll figure it out.
It's a house in Mulvane and I'm meeting them tomorrow, but I know we're not listing tomorrow. But I've put it off till tomorrow so that I could talk to them about it because they're very excited about the idea.
Well, again, sign writers are easy, and big auction across the top of a sign in red would get anybody's attention. But you're right that McCurdy's got a sign that I think's 2x4, maybe. Maybe 2x3.
The oversized, the oversized
Yeah.
ones that we used to use were, I think, 2x3s.
2x3, and I'm sure I can get GR to whoop something up for me. It'll be next week anyway.
So Dixie, I think that what we should do is, if you are the actual first guinea pig for the office, I think the broker should allow that to apply towards your cap.
Hope is great. It builds character. Okay. Anybody else have questions?
Yeah, how do you turn this thing off?
We'll take care of it.
All right, I'm gonna end the recording, guys. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Greg.